Namaskar and welcome back to Media Scan, your weekend dose of headlines, controversies and perspectives. The Disaster Management Act is not in effect anymore as COVID cases are well under control countrywide. However, do continue to exercise caution. Meanwhile, all the four BJP chief ministers are back at the helm of affairs in their respective states. There is a lot going on in the media headlines. So, first up, what made news? Yogi Adityanath in Uttar Pradesh, Pushkar Singh Dhami in Uttarakhand and N. Biren Singh in Manipur. All three of them took oath for a second consecutive term this week in their respective states. With Pramod Sawant taking oath earlier in Goa, all the four sitting chief ministers from BJP are back in the saddle. Two deputy chief ministers and 50 other ministers were also sworn in at the ceremony in Lucknow, which was attended by more than 50,000 people, it has been reported. In an incident which shook the country with horror, 8 innocents were burnt alive, including several women and even a child in Bogatui village of Birbhum in West Bengal. Reported to be a case of political vengeance between two local warring factions of the Trinamool Congress, the incident has raised serious questions on the role of the police and local administration, which turned up long after the innocents had been charged to death. Taking suo motu cognizance, the Calcutta High Court remarked that the incident had shaken the conscience of the nation and has now ordered a CBI probe. India's exports touched a new high this week as we achieved the target of a whopping $400 billion, and that too almost 10 days before the targeted time frame. Prime Minister Modi congratulated farmers, weavers, MSMEs, manufacturers and exporters for achieving this ambitious target. External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar has reiterated that India's position on Russia-Ukraine conflict is guided by our national interest. Speaking at an event this week, Jaishankar said India's foreign policy was based on 6 principles. He underscored New Delhi's consistent position that there must be immediate cessation of hostilities and a return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy. We are going to have a very interesting conversation on the subject just in a few moments. All the 3 units of the Municipal Corporation of Delhi will be merged into one entity once again. A bill to this effect was passed in the Lok Sabha on Friday. The centre initiated the merger as questions were raised about the uneven distribution of resources and problems in revenue ever since MCD was trifurcated in 2012. So those were the headlines you saw dominating the media space throughout the week. And now I would like to come to India's position and the various angles being attributed or associated as far as the Ukraine-Russia situation is concerned vis-a-vis India's stance. Viewers, you must have noticed, as we all have, that the Western world does not seem to be very happy about the fierce neutrality that India has consistently maintained over the Russia-Ukraine situation in the past 1 odd month or more. In fact, India's position has not only been totally unambiguous, but it has been consistent through all those weeks, and that is, we have wanted immediate cessation of hostilities and a comeback to the path of diplomacy, because New Delhi believes that this is the only way out of the vexed situation. However, there are powers, and not only in the Western governments, but even in the media, who have been condemning India for its position, questioning even, and some have gone so far as to say that India is acting as a rank opportunist. Why is the Western media taking this position? Is India really questionable in the stance it has taken? And what seems to be the way forward? On all these issues, I have a very distinguished panel of guests here with me this evening. Let me introduce my first guest to you. My first guest this evening, a well-known former diplomat, has served the country in various parts of the world for long years, an author and a well-known commentator these days. Allow me to welcome Vishnu Prakash to Media Scan this evening. Good evening and welcome, sir.
Pleasure. Thank you.
My second guest for the evening, a common face on Media Scan. You have heard him earlier on our show, a well-known author, an analyst on strategic affairs, the founder, CEO of the Ushanas Foundation, Abhinav Pandya. Welcome back to Media Scan, Abhinav.
Thank you. Thank you.
And without wasting any more time, I want to come to Vishnu Prakash first. Sir, like us, have you also been following the angles, the treatment, the opinions appearing repeatedly in the Western media on the position India has taken over the Ukraine-Russia situation? And what are your first impressions, sir, before I come to other aspects of the topic?
Pleasure to be on the show with you. Don't we all know that the Western media is right? The Western media knows everything. They have to comment on everything, and nothing, quote unquote, is right with India. India's democracy is wrong. India's societal makeup is wrong. India's does not know how to walk. India doesn't know how to talk. If India, for example, let's look at the sheer hypocrisy.
Yes.
Russia has offered cheap oil. India wants to buy it. Well, that is wrong. But the Nord Stream 1 pipeline continues to go through Ukraine to give oil to Europe. That is right. I mean, imagine. Ukraine is, there is a conflict going on in Ukraine. They are allowing oil to go, gas to go. Europe is getting it, that is right.
Even during this conflict, sir, in the midst of the conflict, they are having agreements on the gas and the oil.
Yeah, that's right. But if India buys it, it's wrong. I mean, then there is a magazine called, I'll name it, called The Economist, which does not know that 15th August 1947 happened. Because they try to tell you, how should we be voting? You know, so there is this concern. And how often have you seen a positive story about India? You know, look at the vaccination drive. Do you see a whiff? They are the first to criticize. They all gang up. There's a vested interest. And as far as we are concerned, let them say what they have to say. India is a big country. We know how to take care of our interests, and we will take care of our interests.
So I have a quick query here, sir. Before you may carry on with your argument, those were harsh words, of course, though sarcastic. I mean, India as a country which has, which has its own position in the international arena, which is a part of the global system. Do we not have the autonomy? Do we not have the space, the freedom to decide our foreign policy? And should our democracy be questioned? Should our intent be questioned just because our position does not, coincide, is not contiguous to certain countries in the West?
Well, they have a right, or they have appropriated the right to question us. I mean, in a democracy, you cannot deny that. All right, question us. But for us, we have every right to stake out, do what is in India's interest. Name of the game in foreign policy is to safeguard your national interests.
Right.
Now, we will do that. We have the heft, we have the size, we have the ability to do that. We have always done that. And certainly if it does not gel with the Western outlook, then they are going to be unhappy. I mean, for the West, we know that the belief is that do as I say, not as I do. But you see, point is, every nation stands on an issue depending on where it sits. We are in a certain geography. We have our challenges, we have our aspirations, we have our security concerns, and we will do what is in India's national interest, period.
Absolutely.
So,
and
take it or leave it.
That is precisely what External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar flagged while he was addressing an event earlier this week in New Delhi itself. And he said our foreign policy stands on 6 distinct principles. and it is going to be guided and decided by our national interest. However, sir, allow me to bring in Abhinav Pandya also here into the discussion. Abhinav Pandya, I have been reading your dispatches, your reports on the entire issue. As an expert on geopolitics, how would you rate the world's treatment of India's position, or rather the world's outlook towards our position? And do you agree with the views expressed by Vishnu Prakash ji here? Do you think India has really compromised its democratic position, its credentials by taking this position? And I'm asking this question because not only the Western media, a section of the Indian media has also now started writing this.
Thank you so much, Smitaji, for inviting me today. It's a real honor to be here with Ambassador Vishnu Prakash and definitely in this media scan program once again. I agree with Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. I mean, I entirely agree with him. As a security analyst, I have a different way to look at most of these media organizations and Western academic institutions as well as the think tanks. We are living in the fourth generation warfare, fifth generation warfare, where information warfare, perception building, narrative warfare is a major constituent of global war doctrines or strategic doctrines. So I must say that a very major part of this is a campaign. It's a propaganda, or it's a pressure to just to pressurize India because India is a democratic country. And
okay, hold on. Mr. Pandya, are you trying to say that, because the Western world has a certain position which is fine by their standpoint, so their media might be functioning as a tool to pressurize us by making us, creating a guilt trip for us about why we have taken this neutral position?
Yes, I mean, it always happens. The deep state is always at work, and some of these things, I mean, it's very difficult to prove or disprove, but in the domain of intelligence jargon, intelligence studies or security studies, such things always take place. Now coming to the Western media, I don't really care much about their response, because I mean, I have never come across even one single incident when they praised our democracy. You dispute the application of Article 370, look at their coverage of what happened after the Article 370. There was not a single civilian killing in Kashmir. Things were managed very properly, but the way it was covered in New York Times, Washington Post was pathetic. The recent hijab controversy also, we were completely we were morally right. We were trying to impose
with COVID, during our battle with COVID too.
COVID vaccination drive, most of the time, I mean, I don't see a single incident where they have not indulged in moral policing or like denigrating India, commanding us on democracy, where their own record is completely blemished. America could...
Why do you think it is so, Mr. Pandya? Why do they take such a position on every issue vis-a-vis India? There must be a reason.
Well, first of all, I must say that there are very deep-rooted interests and deep-rooted stakeholders and powers working to destabilize and sabotage, and certainly those things fall in the purview of very hardcore intelligence studies. So it may not be the right platform to discuss all those critical issues. But what I can highlight here is that
those are very serious allegations.
Yes. But what I want to highlight here is that America's own record, it's quite blemished. You see, they could instate the barbaric and medieval Taliban in power in Afghanistan. Whenever India raised issues about Pakistan and its terror sponsors, Americans were never serious about our interests. They could not even respectably include us in the discussions on the Afghan settlement, on Taliban issues and all that. Now they expect us to completely let go of our national interest and just, follow the bandwagon which they are carrying. So that doesn't make sense. And if it comes to the merits and demerits of India's decision, I must say India has taken a very principled stand. India is not supporting Russians. India is neutral. India has said that the issue must be resolved diplomatically through dialogue and peace. India is not a passive fence-sitter, which the Western media is saying.
Since we have a very seasoned, experienced diplomat with us also this evening, let me throw that question to him now. Vishnu Prakash, as Abhinav just pointed out, the position that India has taken is no doubt fiercely neutral. But successively in all the sittings at the UN, as I said, our External Affairs Minister has flagged it. Prime Minister Modi himself has flagged it during his conversations with the Russian president, the Ukrainian president, and other world leaders. Even in our meetings at the UN, we have been flagging it. So we have maintained a very consistent position, including this very week, when 2 resolutions were moved at the UN in different rooms by 2 different completely opposed parties. So how do you see, how long can we sustain this position of fierce neutrality and being completely without tilting to any side? And I'm asking this, sir, because many of our experts, including Indian commentators, have written that this neutral position is not sustainable. India cannot remain a fence sitter, it will have to take sides. Do you agree, sir?
With all due respect, and you will pardon that, I'll seek your indulgence of both of you.
Sir?
I do not think that India is neutral. Not at all. India is independent. There's a very big difference.
Okay.
You are neutral when you don't have the skin in the game. You don't have a stake. For us, the stakes are very vital. Let me explain. What has India's position been? That international law should be respected.
Yes.
That human rights of Ukrainians should be respected, should be protected. That territorial integrity and sovereignty should be respected. Is this neutrality? What you have said is...
I think it's a principled position.
Yeah, it is. This is how we look at it. You know, what does the West do? Sanctions. Okay,
Yes.
sanctions. Okay, you are bad. You are a terrorist. Or you are a war criminal. Now, does that solve a problem? India has walked the talk. I would like to, anybody tell me that India has shied away from a dialogue. 45 rounds of talks at the summit level with Pakistan from 1947 to 1917. 15 rounds of boundary level talks already with China since the Galwan crisis. So what are we saying? That we are not publicly pointing fingers because it is counterproductive. We are not calling names because name calling does not help. What has Prime Minister Modi requested President Putin to do? He has requested him, urged him to speak directly to Mr. Zelensky. Is this neutrality? You know, so India has taken, we know the Queen's language reasonably well. We don't need dictation from anybody as to what to say. All we are doing is, and by the way, our position is not static. Our position is evolving because what Russia has done is something which cannot be condoned.
Yes.
And therefore we have, I can say that, but if I were kind of in the saddle, I would not be at liberty to say that. So India has taken a very principled position which is evolving. Nothing is written in stone. Depending on how it pans out, we will take a decision, but it will be our decision. And they will not like it, some of them. They say we should be on the right side of history. All right. And who writes the history? I mean, it's a mug's game. You can never be right, can never be wrong. Okay, you can never be right because, you decide on the rules of the engagement. Now, just a couple of other comments. You are asking or wondering why is they taking that position. Gandhiji had a very good answer. He said, when you stake out an independent position, they first ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they criticize you, then you win. So, I mean, just because we have the chutzpah, we have the ability to take a position in our national interest, there is heartburning. And last point, you were talking about Afghanistan, which I am so happy you did. You know, I recall we were requested to send troops to Afghanistan to do what?
Yes.
To deal with Al-Qaeda and Taliban. So, all right, very good. What about the Pakistani-based terror groups? No, Pakistan, that's a different matter altogether. You know, because Pakistan is pretending to be a partner in, so no, they have to be left aside. Because that is what hurts us, but that is not on the radar screen. So that is how it is. That's realpolitik. It's just because you call the shots, you want to be prescriptive. Thank you. We will take care of our interests.
Very profoundly put, sir, and really, really deep words to say that because we have the leverage, we have the moral strength, we have the chutzpah to take a position which which caters to our national interest. At the same time, our principles, it might be creating heartburn for a lot of people around the globe. But on that point, allow me to bring in Abhinav back into the discussion. Abhinav Pandya, you just heard Vishnu Prakash explain, the entire geopolitics so well. But it just sort of raises one question that came to my mind, and that is, within our country, or if I may say people who are Indians by origins, maybe living abroad or closer home, they have also been questioning India on its claim of democracy and saying that, one expert of Indian origin, she went to the extent of calling us a rank opportunist for taking this position, and people have been commenting that, oh, we will have to regret this position, it's time India thought, did some rethinking, and this is not going to sustain. Abhinav, how do you look at these comments, and what do you think, or can they influence India's global standing on this issue in any manner? What are your thoughts?
First and foremost, I don't think they can influence our global standing on these things. Okay? I just came across a few articles in some of the Indian portals lately criticizing India's stand and questioning India's democratic credentials and all. Let me state very frankly and very honestly. Well, if we keep a mark of 100, there may be one or two or a few voices who may genuinely have such views. But then you cannot rule out the fact that many of these organizations, portals, they may be acting as front for some particular agendas, or they may be, they must be supported by some particular interest who want India to change the decision, or who some foreign interest or foreign, I would say, agencies who want to use these tools or these portals and platforms to pressurize India by raising some artificial fears of India's image and credibility and all. But I've seen I've read those articles, and I can assure that the kind of reasoning and the arguments which they have given, that can be easily refuted. And I guess we should be proactive in refuting those arguments, because once again, I must say that this is the part of the whole propaganda and information warfare, just to pressurize India to change its decision or to create some kind of image pressure on India. So it's a part of that. And we should not really be concerned about that, as long as we can justify our position and we can come out with reasonable and rational arguments, and that we can.
Tell me one thing, Mr. Pandya, it's easy for a person who is so well read and so abreast, up to date with the geopolitics, with all this propaganda war and information cyber war that goes on all the time. But for a common news consumer, for someone who reads the news believing it to be the truth, believing it to have all sides of the picture, how does a common news consumer discern, if a certain opinion or a certain news, particularly when it comes to news copies, whether it is actually the statement of facts, or is it, as you said, acting as a front for certain vested interests who might be having some other strategic goal in mind?
Well, for an entirely lay observer or a first-time reader, it may be very difficult, because these things are done in a very sophisticated manner. If you read their articles, if you read their comments, then you feel, they're very rationally argued. They have good citations, good references, some very prominent, eminent faces writing those articles. But it's very difficult for a very ordinary observer. But if you have interest in geopolitical issues, if you have been studying these things for a long time, then you can make the difference, like which organization is following what kind of ideology, what line they are taking, and their attitude.
I'm sorry, Abhinav, I'll have to cut you short here because I have very little time left with me. But before I wind up, I want you to tell us one very quick query rather. Do you think our own media has been able to counter these kind of attacks or questions adequately on the Ukraine question?
I don't think so. I mean, they've not been
No?
able to counter it very effectively because I see that the response has been very haphazard and I mean, they lack intellectual rigor in countering these things. I was just reading an article written in National Interest. So there is 3 points that India stands harms India in 3 possible ways. First, I mean, it makes the possibility of Chinese attack very real, and India will not be able to defend itself in the face of the Chinese attack. Second, it says that it will impact India-US relationship, and third, it says that it harms India's image of being a liberal democracy.
So
Now, these
that
things
means this appears to be a greater fear mongering than even the Western media outlets. Would you agree?
so sorry, can you repeat the question?
No, I
The last
said
question.
the article that you were mentioning just now, the questions that have been raised, if you go by them, then the fear mongering be created by some Indian platforms could be even more sinister than the Western media.
Yes, it certainly does. But what I see that these arguments have been made in a very academic manner, and I guess they need to be countered in a very logical and rational manner. Like for instance, one example. They
Okay,
say that,
allow me to bring in Vishnu Prakash quickly here before I have to really wind up now. Vishnu Prakash ji, do you really agree with Abhinav's position that the Indian media, our writers, have not been able to adequately counter the attack on us over the Ukraine question?
I do agree with Mr. Abhinav. There are a few nuances that I would like to talk of.
Yes, sir.
One, I have been a part of the government for 36 years. I have been the spokesperson of MEA. We need to do a better job controlling the narrative. And there, I think it lies more with the establishment, because what we do is we choose our words very carefully, we balance every word, and we put out a statement. Now, at times we are reactive, at times we believe that we have nuanced it, but Mr. Abhinav will understand the nuance, you will understand the nuance, I will, the common man will not.
Right.
So we need to explain the nuance, and just putting it out once does not help. I'm afraid you have to say it again and again and again. Why not? Why are we bashful about it? I've always had this difficulty. Secondly, in a democracy, people will have different opinions. So there is nothing criminal about it.
Yes.
If I have a different notion or belief, I have a right to express it. But if I'm doing it for some silver coins, it's a different matter. We have the left liberal cabal, which would love to relate to a certain audience. So they will continue doing that. So the answer to that is the establishment, the officials, the government, to be a little more emphatic about it, to put out the narrative forcefully. Why not? But let us not worry about those detractors. We will always have detractors. As they say, the caravan moves on. Somebody keeps doing something. Good luck to them.
So I guess that's a much larger, that is much more food for thought and a larger question that we should actually sit together and discuss on Media Scan one of these evenings. And definitely, sir, I'll call you back on that when very soon we come back to this question of how we, deal with the global narrative vis-a-vis India.
Along with Mr. Abhinav.
Oh, sure. Point taken, sir. But I am afraid for this evening, I shall have to end it here. I have completely run out of time. So allow me to wrap up for this evening. But before that, Vishnu Prakash ji, thank you so much for finding the time at such a short notice. And it is always such a learning experience to converse with you, sir. Please join us back again one evening. Thank you once again. And Abhinav Pandya, thanks again for those very analytic thoughts that you shared with us, your perspective on the matter. And with that, viewers, it's a wrap up on Media Scan for this evening. But do keep watching DD India as we shall continue to scan the media for you. Good night.
क्या बात है, बहुत फिट लग रहा है।